afternoon, children, and welcome back to the adventures of Zara the Paddington Poodle. Now, we've read up to chapter 5, and today we are going to start with chapter 6. So I suggest that you get ready, sit back and enjoy. Now, I have some bad news. Ziggy will not be joining us today. He has decided to go on holidays. Now remember, up until now, Ziggy has been asleep in the saddlebag. Ziggy finally woke and wondered how their trip was progressing so far. He peered over the saddlebag and was just in time to see everyone making a tight-knit circle around the two drovers with the swollen McArthur River not more than 50 metres in the background. All eyes were on Ernie as he dished out instructions on how they were going to cross the river safely. Now the mum, the dad, Ranger and the cronies, Shark, Bucky, Bullet, Chester and us drovers will take the herd through the river, while Zar, Ruby and Wally are to drive the ute downstream and cross the McArthur River at the boat ramp, set up camp and prepare dinner for when we finally arrive. Are we all in agreement? 16 heads nodded in acknowledgement. The gang hung on to his every word as he reminded them that the waters they were about to cross were infested with saltwater crocodiles, or salties as the locals like to call them. These prehistoric beasts with their leathery armour and very sharp teeth had no fear and would attack anything, even things way bigger than themselves. That morning, whilst browsing through the Northern Territory newspaper, the folks had read that twice over the last 2 months, horses had been attacked at the McArthur Junction boat ramp, which was where they had planned to cross with the cattle, and as a result, Ernie had adjusted their course 10 kilometres upstream. We will drive the cattle quickly through the river just at the end of the rapids, but where the waters are still turbulent enough to keep the saltwater crocodiles at bay. I will leave it up to you guys to sort out your positions. Okay, let's get going, shall we? Said Ernie, cracking his whip in the air. Meanwhile, Ziggy had noticed something strange about Zara. "What on earth is that on your head?" he inquired. "G'day, Ziggy, I'm Ruby the Spinifex hopping mouth," said a tiny creature in a high-pitched Australian accent. "Oh my goodness, you are so cute!" Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that the gang was ready to move towards the river and said, "Well, it looks like we're about to move out. Let's catch up in camp," said Ziggy, settling himself into his cosy saddlebag. "See you on the other side," she replied, sinking back into the comfort of Zar's floppy head. "Zig, I have to warn you, it's going to be rough out there. Therefore, will you promise me that you will stay inside the saddlebag? Capiche?" said Shout. "Well, of course I will," he replied, quivering in excitement and terror all at the same time. "Okay, folks, are we all set?" Ranger asked, casting his eyes over the herd for a final check. He nodded to Zar and their eyes locked in understanding. Zar turned and leapt into the ute alongside Wally, with Ruby securely on his head, and once inside, pressed his nose firmly up against the back window. His heart beat wildly in his chest like a caged bird trying to break free, and he gasped for air like a fish out of water. "Zar, you needn't worry, they're in good hands," said Wally. "Ranger, the horses and the drovers have done this many times before, so chill out and enjoy the ride." "Thank you," whooped Zar, as his long pink tongue slipped out of his mouth and planted a big sloppy kiss on Wally's side of his face, causing him to break out into laughter. Meanwhile, the young herd had gone nuts at the thought of crocodiles lying in wait for them and tore around, causing a thick cloud of dust to rise. As the ute drove off, Zar's last dusty view was of Ranger and Shout working to bring the young herd back in line. Then there was nothing. They were out of sight. He turned around and sat gazing out the window as if in a daze. So let's have a look. So here we have Shout and Ranger chasing the herd to bring them back in line. "What have I done? I have gone and left them. They might need my help." Giant tears rolled down Zar's beautiful face and dripped into the leather seat. In an attempt to distract the distressed poodle, Ruby said, "Zar, Wally needs your help to get us safely across the river." Hiccuping back a gigantic sob, Zar hung himself out of the window and scouted the area, but not a crocodile could be seen, so he sat back to enjoy the ride, but it was premature to think that they were safe. They slowly made their way down the river bank, creeping over the rocks that had fallen across the track, and when they hit the edge of the water, slipped into the fast-flowing McArthur River. The force of the water slammed itself against the ute, pushing them sideways. However, with a little effort, Wally was able to steer them back on the trail. They were about a quarter of the way across the river when the wheels suddenly lost their grip and started spinning around and round. "Whee, whee, whee," they screeched as they tried to grip the river bed. But the river finally took control and they found themselves floating downstream. The water started gushing through the cracks of the door, flooding the cabin, forcing Zar to whip his feet up onto the seat, and he said, "I think we're going to sink." "Oh my goodness, what are we going to do?" squealed Ruby as the panic set in. She quickly leapt off Zar's head and onto the dashboard, well out of reach of the rising water. Suddenly, Wally noticed something floating alongside them. It was about 1.5 meters in length and had browny, leathery skin that was sprinkled with yellow and cream spots. "Look, guys, that's a Merton's water monitor," he said, pointing through the window. "Gosh, I haven't seen one of those in a long while. I wonder what they're doing all the way out here." Back at the crossing, Ranger, Shout and the gang had almost used every tactic they knew to settle the young herd. But Ranger had one more trick up his sleeve, and breathing deeply, he lifted his nose to the air. "Moo!" he roared, even scaring the birds of prey above. Axel, who had been creating quite a stir, stopped dead in his tracks and looked sheepishly up at the big bull. "I gave you more credit than you deserve, young man," said Ranger, walking up to the little bull. "I really thought you had a lot more sense than the rest of the herd and had planned to teach you to be a leader. But your recent behaviour has left me in serious doubt as to whether you have what it takes," he added, nodding sternly at Axel. "Sorry, mate, I just panicked a little," he replied, hanging his head in disgrace. He was dismayed at his immature behaviour and took Ranger's censure on the chin. "It's Mr. Ranger to you. Now, I am, much to my surprise, going to give you another chance and show me and the others," he said, nodding to Shout and Bullet and the cronies, "what I believed I saw in you. So pull yourself together and get out there and settle the young ones down." Sure, Mr. Ranger," stuttered Axel, looking sheepishly down at his hooves. He idolised the big bull, as he was a fair, charismatic and charming leader. Disappointed to have let Ranger down, he broke away and quickly trotted over to the youngsters, giving off a high-pitched bellow. "Moo!" he squeaked, almost laughing at his pathetic attempt to sound just like his hero. He kept a stern look on his face, just in case anyone was looking at this, as this was his one and only chance to make it up to himself and earn back Ranger's respect. The young herd laughed in his face and kicked up their heels in defiance. "Moo!" he bellowed deeply, with such conviction he even scared himself. The herd stopped dead in their tracks and swung around to look at Axel with a surreal look on their faces, as they hadn't expected this from their friend. "Now listen very carefully, as this is how it's going to go down," he said. "We are going to follow Ernie, Chester and the cronies into the river in an orderly manner, and I guarantee none of you will be turned into a juicy Wagyu steak for those nasty crocodiles who are just waiting for one of you to screw up. Is that clear?" Raking the ground with his small hoof. "Now Bullet will be flanking us on the left and Shout will be on our right, with Jimmy, Bucky and Ranger bringing up the rear, so I know we'll be safe," he added, just as Ernie and Chester slid down the river bank and leapt into the fast-moving water. Sure, Axel," they stuttered. Ranger was so impressed with the little bull's efforts, he tossed his horns in a sign of praise which caused Axel to blush bright red through his grey coat. The water slammed hard against Chester's legs, forcing him to push his way forward, surging a path for the others to follow. "The river is running faster than I expected, so watch your footing," screamed Ernie above the roar of the rapids. He kept a firm hold on Chester's chestnut mane, just in case he slid off the saddle. With a nod from Ranger, the cronies leapt in behind Chester and Ernie, and with their eyes closed, the young herd, with Axel and lead, plunged into the river, followed by the others, and the crossing got underway. The crocodiles were lurking in the reeds, waiting for them, as if they'd been forewarned. There were 2 large crocs, approximately 4 metres in length, and about half a dozen smaller ones, ranging between 1 and 2 metres long. Their beady eyes bobbed up and down on the water like floating bobbers, but it was the thousands of tiny bubbles of air that escaped their noses that gave away their positions. As Shout waded through the river, he involuntarily whipped his tail up and down the surface like a fly fishing rod luring its prey, and managed to entice one of the tinier crocodiles, which leapt up out of the water, propelled by its mighty back legs, to grab hold of the horse's tail. Unable to get a firm grip, the little crocodile flopped back onto the river with a big splash. The strands of Shout's tail ran through his filthy yellow teeth, as if it was dental floss. Just as the croc hit the water, his stomach rumbled loudly, reminding him of how hungry he was, spurring him on. "Now this, my friends," said the little crocodile, licking his lips and eyeing the big black horse. "This is dinner." Eagerly egging him on, the juvenile crocs yelled, "Go get him, Salty!" Salty circled around to gather momentum, and with one almighty leap, pushed himself higher than before. But before he had a chance to sink his filthy yellow teeth into Shout's dock, Shout kicked out his back legs and neighed, "Now take that!" double-barreling the little crocodile through the air like he'd been fired out of a cannon. So here we have Ernie and the horses and everybody crossing the river. And here we have Shout kicking Salty into the air. "Come on, is that all you've got?" squealed Shout, executing a magnificent piaffe and readying himself to let go of another. He was eager to teach the young crocodiles a lesson or two, but that kick was enough to deter any of the other juvenile crocs from coming in within cooee of the mighty horse, and they quickly swam to join their friend on the riverbank. "Phew, that was close," said Salty, clicking his jaw into place. As he saw the smug look on his face as he said, "Zip your lips, you lot. I already know that was a little ambitious of me to tackle a big horse like that, but you better watch out, 'cause when I'm a little older, I will turn him into mincemeat." With that, he and his friends opened their jaws to sunbake, relishing in the warmth of the diminishing afternoon sun. "Oh my goodness, Shout, you were amazing," squealed Ziggy. Well, that brings us to the end of chapter 6. I hope you've enjoyed the story so far, and we look forward to bringing you chapter 7 tomorrow at 4 p.m. Good night, everybody.